That's enough of that. Welcome back to week 14 of the Overwatch League. We thank you for tuning in to Tac Visor, the Overwatch League podcast, where we recap the previous week, give our predictions for the following week, and our top 5 power rankings. We also find out who won the week in predictions. How you doing?
Doing good. Doing good. How are you?
Good. How was your week?
I mean, it was pretty good. Wasn't bad.
Nothing exciting.
Nothing exciting except the matches over the weekend, and they most of them didn't disappoint. So
yeah, they were very exciting. It's been an absolute wild week. And let's go ahead and jump in here then. First match that I really wanted to talk about was NYXL versus the Hunters.
Hunters?
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't play the Hunters.
Who? Why did I write
They
it
played
wrong?
the Charge.
Charge. That's what I meant. My note's wrong. Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is why you double check your homework.
You talk about it since apparently I don't know what I'm talking about.
Honestly, it was one of those matches that it was obviously for most of us it was a shocking win, but for me the takeaways really resided with the Charge more than NYXL.
Yeah,
and that's simply because the Charge, they just played so well. And I actually kind of went back to look at some of their previous tape to see if my assumptions were correct in what they've been running, and basically the hero pool favored them, and it's going to favor them heading into the next couple of weeks. So all this time that they've had, running the Diva, the Sigma, the Orisa with the Sigma, all these different compositions, it's favored them, and they've finally ironed out all the details, and their spacing, their rotation, they're phenomenal. And Nero is showing that he's not just a one trick on the Pharah. So for me, it was more about them just playing so well and just continuing the momentum that they've built with this composition, more so than NYXL not maybe performing up to their expectations. But for them, we saw a little bit more experimentation, which we talked about last week. Experimentation is going to be a huge thing. The only thing that was unfortunate this time around was their experimentation was now at a point where you can't really give up any more games. When you had a lead, you were in, right there, second, third place in that contention. Now you drop the match to fall now below San Fran and Shanghai. So now the experimentation probably needs to come in practice, not so much experimenting in the matches now. Now in the matches, you need to run with what you can run. And, that's going to be kind of a thing to watch going forward. But for me, it was really the Chargers just came out and they played how they know how with this composition. And it's them putting themselves in the conversation of a top 5 team. So,
yeah, I think the Charge played extremely well. I did think the only thing that I thought was a little weird is putting mono on Sig. I thought that was a weird decision, and I think that goes to some of the experimentation that you were hitting on. It's a little late in the game to be experimenting in the matches. I agree. Maybe experimenting in your scrims outside of the matches. And I know that the hero locks definitely favored the Charge. With Reinhardt being out, that's obviously a huge part of NYXL's game is Reinhardt. So I did think it was a little weird that they were playing on the Sig. And I think the biggest takeaway here was that the Charge were winning the mirror matchups. They were just playing better. The Charge really took charge in the game and in the match and just never really let up. Now, I think that the score doesn't quite show how close the match actually was.
correct.
So 3-1 looks more like they handled it pretty well, but it was fairly close in the match. So I just think them winning when they were mirrored comps, just the Charge being able to say, hey, we're just better at this comp than you are. And I think that they were able to do that against a great team. I mean, we've seen NYXL do great things, and unfortunately they've had a rough stretch here, but I think they'll kick back. Let's see if I get this one right. Seoul, Shanghai. They played each other, right?
Hey, there you go. They played each other. Yeah, and it was the match that we had we had hoped for the first time these teams played,
Yes.
and certainly ended up, in my opinion, being the match of the weekend. It was fun from beginning to end. It was awesome.
It was not my favorite match to watch this weekend. We'll get to that one later.
Okay.
But the Shanghai has been basically untouchable for almost all season right now.
For the better part of the season, yeah.
Yeah, and so Seoul obviously on a 9 map losing streak, 3 or 4 times in 12 maybe in a row. I believe that they were blanked.
It was a 9. Yeah, you got that
9 match.
nine-map
Okay,
losing streak.
so I think when they came out in the dive comp, I think it really took Shanghai by surprise. I know
Uh,
most teams were running with the dive composition with Reinhardt and especially with Reaper being out because all of a sudden Winston's biggest counter isn't on the map. So I think that really took them by surprise.
yeah, and you could kind of tell that it did was, they were going in at a much slower pace than the Dynasty were, Shanghai was. And they kind of, you could see they were like, oh my gosh, deer in the headlights. What's this going on right here? And, credit to the Soul. They, we talked about some of the things that maybe they made decisionally last week that weren't the greatest in the world. We saw them adjust a lot of those things. And it ended up paying off. Early on, it kind of looked like Shanghai had found their footing after the initial surprise and gave up, about that first 60% on the point. Once that had gone by, they were kind of back into their rhythm. But no, I think running that dive was a good surprise and a good strategy by the Dynasty that really got them back on track, I think.
Yeah, and we watched the Lucio Moira composition for Shanghai just wasn't working, and we've seen that work so well for weeks now. And Profit and Fitz, they really stepped up this week. It's like Profit hurt us last week, say that he wasn't performing well. He just kind of took over the match, especially on that Tracer, which he's known for. So he just getting picks and basically doing whatever the hell he wanted to in the back line, and there was not really anything that Shanghai could do about it.
No, and that was I'd even said that maybe that was kind of a coaching thing, is they need to just start giving Profit the heroes he's good with. Maybe not necessarily like say this is the comp we're going to run, so by default you're going to run this. I mean, because you can run a dive without a Tracer. So they could have easily gone your typical dive with, a Genji or, something along those lines. But they went out and said, you know what, we're going to run with Tracer. Profit. It's all you. And he went out and he looked like the finals MVP that we saw season 1.
Yeah, I agree.
He went out and he, early on, just set the pace. He dictated the first, I'd say at least the first 3 to 6 encounters, the first 3 to 6 team fights. He was the starting factor and just said, this is how we're going to do it. And you could see it kind of, pass on to Fitz, even to Gesture and Bedosin. Bedosin finally looked like one of the high-class Zens again that we'd seen him be the first 2 seasons, where he was getting eliminations, getting hero damage just as much as healing. And for me, though, as much as I loved the play of Profit, Bedosin, and Gesture, who had some issues with overextending at times, can we talk about Fitz real quick? That man, to me, was the MVP of the match. His Sombra got so much better from last week to this week.
So much
and
better.
his Hanzo we haven't seen great Hanzo play like that in a good while.
Yeah, Fitz, they both really took it together. And I'm glad you brought up Bedosin too, because I had a note here that just said, Bedosin bringing Zen back to DPS. Because he did. We've seen Aim God and we know what Jonak does on Zen, but they've been playing a lot of other roles, not necessarily Zen. And Bedosin just was nailing people, and his critical shots was high. I can't remember the exact DPS output that he had, but it was pretty even with the healing output that he was having. And he's just doing so much damage. And on that dive comp, even when they're not running a full dive, when you don't have the flankers like Reaper in the map, I think it's a lot easier for that Zen to pop off, and the other team is running dive. There's not really a shield. Winston shield goes down really fast, and if you're your healers can put out that much damage, the enemy team's going to have a hard time coping with that, and we saw that happen.
Yeah, and the thing that really captivated me most with Fitz's play, we talked about the Hanzo, and of course, but his Sombra, we talked about how your positioning has to be better, especially when you cast that EMP to make sure you catch the support alts. We saw him missing the Zen, missing the Zen, missing the Zen. This week, it's Lucio's the more critical of the alts that we would see in the support line. And every time he EMP'd, he got the Lucio.
Nailed him.
Which actually is kind of a spoiler alert for one of our matches later on we're going to talk about.
Well, we can move on. That was a hell of a performance from Seoul, and obviously Shanghai is recovered just fine, because I wanted to go ahead and jump to their second match the next day, which I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but Spark versus Shanghai, I thought that this match would be a lot more interesting since Shanghai lost to Seoul, because the Spark were playing a little bit better, starting to get some rolls, and they just couldn't do anything. Now, they still stuck with the dive versus the double shield, and we kind of saw that it just works better than the double shield.
Yeah, it played to their strengths better. Because one of the issues that I saw and it almost kind of caught me back. My initial issue with the Dynasty match was why Lip on the hit scan and not Fleta?
Yep.
Or why not Fleta on the flanker heroes like the Tracer and things when they were trying to match at points? Because I feel like Fleta's more attuned to be able to do those things, whereas Lip is more of a complementary player. And we kind of saw in his head-to-head matchup with Fitz, he wasn't even matching up with the best. He was matching up with their second best. Even Fitz was owning him. But then the next match, they run the full dive, and we see, better Tracer play. And I think a lot of it had to utilize with, it was kind of that double shield dive type of situation. And I think it made it easier for Lip to have better positioning.
Yeah.
But it was an odd match to watch because we've seen Spark play Shanghai so closely. And before the Dynasty match, the Spark were the Dragons' only loss.
Yep.
And so I figured we thought with Spark in continuing to improve and having done that already, that we'd have a more, exhilarating and more captivating match.
Yeah, I thought so too. And Lip did play well. He was popping off on the McCree a couple different times, but they just couldn't really handle him. But I think the Dragons, obviously, they were just maybe upset that Seoul had taken their win from what they probably thought was going to be a pretty quick match, and they just rolled over the Spark pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I got ahead of myself, but we can jump back. Take me back to Gladiators versus the Eternal.
Yeah, this was we talked about being up there of one of the matches of the weekend, and at first going into Oasis, it did not look like it was going to be that. It looked like the Gladiators just came to, especially on the first point, just came to say, absolutely no one is touching us. We're going to start rolling through the league. They had all 6 alts online within the first minute of that matchup. Which is insane. Now it speaks to how they position and the fact that they don't overcompensate who's going where. The DPS don't get too far out. The tanks don't, drop too far back or too far forward, and the supports don't leak out into the flank too far. They really keep that spacing tight to where they're all dishing out damage and healing together, depending on the positions and the roles, and it just feeds those alts super quick. But then we saw, Paris kind of bounce back, and then they started to dictate the match, and they just never really let their foot off of the gas. The biggest thing for me was we saw Nico start to make much better decisions as opposed to the week before, where his decision-making on Nepal cost them a more than winnable match against the Fusion. But his decision-making got better, and his play on the Echo, as far as who he was going to duplicate, was phenomenal. And we found out that he's actually not a half bad diva player. It looks like he could be.
Right.
The fact that he was able to charge on Volskaya to cap the win. That last before the second attack, that last cap, 3 diva bombs inside of 20 seconds. 2 of them were from him. That means that
Yes.
he just got in there and he used the abilities of diva that efficiently to build up a second bomb. And basically, it was a triple bomb because we had Hanbin's jump in there, and they
Right.
kept the gladiators off the map and ended up again forcing that second attack setup that got them the match win.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that the Gladiators played bad. I do think that Paris just played better than they did. It did seem at first that No Smite was just getting bullied around by
Mm-hmm.
OGE on Winston. He was getting bullied around pretty bad, but he seemed to make some adjustments with his placement of his shield and where he chose to dive in and how aggressive he chose to be because he was getting bullied around there. So there was some definite quick coaching decisions that were made, and I think that really, really propelled him through the rest of the match. And
Mm-hmm.
I the Gladiators again, they're not getting any value from Sombra in this match. There was almost no follow up to their EMP. There was an EMP where they hit all 6 people and no one died.
Nope.
So you're getting not a lot of value out of that character, and that's the only reason you play her. She's not a high DPS character. You're not going to hit, smoke the leaderboards with your Sombra damage per match, per 10 minutes. It's not going to happen. So that EMP wins you 3 and 4 team fights during the length of one side of the map. And that's really what she's for. So if you're using that EMP and not getting anyone, she offers you no value. Now, I do know that with this dive comp, both of them primarily played dive. So it's a lot messier of a team fight. You've got picks trading left and right. So I understand that there's some questionable ult uses throughout here that sometimes work out and sometimes don't. We see Lucio's drop the beat with only 2 people left, and they can still win that fight because there's no shields really coming out late in the match.
Yeah.
And so you're just not getting anything, and I think that was a big reason why Paris ended up toppling the Gladiators.
And I think another reason was, I mean, again, we saw them both running near mirror comps. At times, they were mirror comps. I think it was also a contrast of styles. You had the Paris Eternal playing far more like advanced. Like one of the things that I really liked watching was how there was a map. I think it was Junkertown. They had whoever was on the Sigma at one point, and I might be thinking of another match, but there was a rotation that they made where the main tank went all the way around and basically pinched off all flanking while the rest of the team just pushed up right down the middle, moved the payload the whole way. Those kind of things of being a little bit more aggressive with who was going to go where. And then you had the Gladiators just playing so defensively. And I think that kind of fed into, not being able to capitalize on an EMP because it's a defensive EMP as opposed to, an attacking EMP. Usually you have better follow-up on the attacking EMP versus the defensive EMP because everyone's trying to peel back and, set up a line. Whereas when you do an attacking, everyone's like, all right, just go get anybody you can. Let's go.
Yeah.
So it was a nice contrast of styles. And that specific, when I kind of watched that, just go back and if you get time, watch the Hollywood match. Just that map, total clinic on 2 opposing styles. It was really cool.
Yeah. So good work from Paris. I did not think that they were going to pull that one out. I thought that the Gladiators were definitely the better team. So I think that they just stole a match. I think that's a match that they are not normally going to win. We see Paris generally beat the teams that they should and lose to the teams that they should. This is one I feel like they stole from one of the better teams in the league. So now we've seen all the changes now with Vancouver, and their match against Washington was first. This is the first time we've seen this new crew that skeleton crew essentially that they've brought in because of the releases, and I don't think we actually got to talk about it on the last podcast because they were still holding on to almost everyone except for Janu. But now everyone's gone. They have a full new team. We did change around some of our predictions, including this one in the Florida. I think the only highlight is a Shredlock is actually not a bad tank. He's not bad. Now he's getting bullied around because he's new and because he doesn't necessarily have the supporting cast around him. And we saw KSA, which I think is funny. We have another KS player in the league, but KSA, KSAA, Kasa. I forget how Zoe said it, but it was one of those, and I believe it's just KSA. But he played pretty well as well. But obviously, we're seeing the disparity between normal good players and how elite the Overwatch League players are, because this is not a good Justice team. They are not good. They are bottom of the barrel currently, and it's about to get worse with the two people that are leaving them. And so Vancouver still couldn't take anything from them. And I just think we're going to see a lot more of that. So Vancouver fans, which I'm no longer, Vancouver fans need to really strap in for probably a pretty terrible offseason.
Yeah, it was just. Yeah. I remember I texted you in the middle of it and was like, "This is like watching paint dry." It was just so bad, because the thing for me is not even just the measure of Overwatch League. Like veterans now are so elite, and good Overwatch players are down here, and there's that disparity. For me, the Justice, they didn't have Corey, so they looked, even winning 3-1 didn't look pretty. It looked very, very painful. And you could tell that Stratus was just like, yeah, let's just get this match over with and get on out of here. I'm going to go do some content creation.
Yeah.
It just was all around an abysmal match. And I could not wait for that one to end any quicker. And I think going forward that the Titans are going to be probably worse than the Boston Uprising at this point. And that's saying a lot. But I think the Washington Justice are going to be right there with them.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're watching a not very good match, unfortunately. Not one that I probably would have tuned into for any longer than one map had I not been doing this. So I need to see a little bit more. So Outlaws versus the Reign. I think it was a lot closer than we thought it was going to be. I know it was a 3-0. I understand that. I'm not saying in the actual score of what it ended up being, talking about in the play. The play was a lot closer than I thought. There were a couple trades, and Dante playing on Tracer, not someone that we've typically seen him play over the last year that he was in the league. The Tracer play was very phenomenal from him, and I think that we could potentially be looking at league MVP Dante. If he was on literally any other team, put him on any other team. I hope the Justice pick him up. Put him on any other team. I don't think he'll take them to the ship, but put him on any other team. We subbed in too late. Linkser comes in and starts playing well, and then it's already too late at that point. You're already down 2-0, and Linkser's not going to be able to bring you back, but we need to... And we've talked about it a couple of times, but they've got to get their subs and rotation better. They're not utilizing the players as best as they should be, and we know that from the supports that they're leaving on the bench and choosing to play together. It just doesn't really make much sense. So in this meta, without a Reaper, without any dive, or without most players not running shields, and you don't have your best hit scan player in, you leave Linkser on the bench? That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, and not only that, you had all this depth at DPS, and now you've elected to take one of the DPS and put him on a tank role, and it not even be a shield tank role. We've seen guys this weekend playing Sigma, who is a main tank, playing in an off-tank position and getting mass amounts of eliminations. Just go look at Void, and that's all you really need to see that it can be successful. And you put him on, instead, you put Hydration on Wrecking Ball, and then also Orisa.
Yes.
doesn't really make much sense. I understand you want to save, the Sigma for Meko, who has, a very good knack for just getting eliminations like crazy, and then you give him a high damage output tank like a Sigma. It's just, you would think 2 + 2 = 4, but in this case it really doesn't, which is odd, but it's just because of the roster decisions that they're making. And unfortunately we wouldn't see Dante go to the Justice, because the Justice would have to give something up, and they have nothing to give up because they're already below the roster minimum. And I stand by what I've been saying. I know that they've had some success with Repel, Jexy, and then Dante with Blase, and of course their standard tank setup of Meko and Muma. I've been saying they should be running Hydration and Dante if they're not going to run Lynx or Dante, and then just run, Rappel or Repel and Jexy instead of Raucus Repel or Raucus Jexy, because you can see, even if they are losing matches like they lost this weekend, where it was just like, oh my gosh, you just got drop kicked into next Thursday. Even in those matches, you see more of an effort. You can see it being a closer match within the fights of contention. Yeah. Outside of that, it's that Houston is well on their way, if they don't shore some things up, to being right down there with, the Justice, the Titans, the Uprising, and even the Hunters to a degree, unfortunately.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I want to get your take on this match as well. I didn't want to. I hate to say this every week, but I didn't want to spend too much time on the Boston match because, unfortunately, it's almost like a bye week for these teams. They're not playing well, and I still know. Fusions is still getting a lot of flack for his tank play, and I think it could be better, but there's a lot more going on with that team right now than just him. And they're going up against an ever-improving Valiant team with KSP and Shax just continually shutting things down on the DPS side. I mean, they can really, really lock down a team fight, and we're seeing them work very well together and with their tanks and healers and on their flanks, and it doesn't really seem to matter what the meta is. They're just killing it. And if you want to go long range, okay, you have KSP as one of maybe the best hit scan right now as far as mid range goes with the McCree and the Ashe that he's been playing. Sure, you'll go with that. Oh, you want to do flank? That's cool. We can put Shax on Tracer, and he's been playing well there. So you don't really have a comeback for that as of right now, because Boston just simply doesn't have the skill to do that. And that's all I really had to say. Sorry, Boston fans. You guys just stick in there. Hope that you get some pickups over the off season, or that Fusions gets traded away for a better team.
I mean, we've seen them trade away great tanks in the past. I mean,
yeah.
Camsu. Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
I know.
And then they let Aim God go last season. And while he's maybe not in the class, I mean, because we typically associate Aim God playing the Zen for Boston.
Yeah.
He's not in the class of, Jonak or Twilight or Rijahong or any of these guys who are efficient with that flex support hero. But he's still very good. He's number 2 in the league right now in healing, behind only Alarm. And you just got to wonder, all these things that you gave up, and now you're here, like, what's your plan moving forward? I mean, you've got to make some acquisitions now, because no one's going to want anything other than Fusions. And I could see Boston not wanting to part with him just because he's their one good player.
He's the staple of that team.
He's the staple. And he shouldn't get the flack that he's been getting, because his best hero, hands down, is Reinhardt.
Yeah.
That man, made his name playing Reinhardt at a high level in season 1, even as they started their downtrend. And then he played it very, very well in the GOATS meta, even though they, again, weren't one of the better teams. Now we've seen Reinhardt banned way too much, and now he's taking a hit for it. And he shouldn't be getting flack. If anything, he should be getting flack. It's the organization itself for not putting a better team around it.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, because we're not talking a lot about that match, That leaves us time for a match that we've kind of skipped over, which is the Hunters versus the Spitfire.
Hey, that's what I was going to talk about next.
So, yeah, see, great minds.
Yeah.
Um, and on that match, it was our first time seeing the Spitfire in a few weeks. I think almost about a month or so now. Um, and they had a very solid performance, I thought. I mean, they to get back into it, they had a good opponent to go up against, absolutely, because the Hunters are they just don't look good. But we'll get to that in a minute. But it was a good match to kind of get back into a rhythm, shake out all the rust and things. We saw Glister come back in, and it was like he didn't miss a beat. And he could honestly, if he keeps this up, put himself in that conversation for Rookie of the Year, especially now that, with Corey out, Glister's actually moved ahead of KSP in solo kills and has an opportunity to be able to, extend that lead and then possibly even contest with Carpe for the most solo kills in the league. Final blows, he's still got a ways to go, but he's just right there at the top 15. And if he plays like he did this weekend, we can see that gap start to close.
Yeah, that man's eating his Wheaties.
Yeah, for sure. And his Widow play has been phenomenal. Like we, when we first saw the Spitfire play before this extended break that they had, he was playing McCree a lot, doing really well. Saw Widow flashes every now and then, but not often. We saw it a lot this weekend, and he just started clicking heads.
Yeah.
And he showed Bacon Jack what for. That is absolutely for certain.
I agree. And the Spitfire, they played very well, like you said, without really skipping really anything, without really dropping a beat. But and they stuck with the double shield when a lot of teams were running with the dive. They really stuck with the double shield, and J-Max seemed like he was in his element playing those shield characters. And I think that against the Hunters, that was a really good thing. I think they could have experiments a little bit later into the match, especially since they haven't had a lot of time to play anyone, or they've had a lot of time off, so they haven't had a lot of time actually playing in matches against some of these people. And so I think that they could have experimented more at the end of the match, especially in like map 3 where they still won, but they're still running a non-dive comp, which I understand it's working. Go ahead and pick up the W and carry on. Any team can beat anyone, any given Sunday, as the saying goes. So I understand why they just wanted to get the W and move on, but you're in a good spot already against a weak Hunters team to go ahead and try something else. And we see that come to bite them in the next match that they played, and we'll get to that one as well.
Yeah, and the one reason that I was kind of okay with them not switching it up and experimenting was with what they had going, they were still having issues with their support positioning. Yeah. Hiley was getting picked way too often. He's a good healer, but he was going out into the flanks too much around the shields, getting picked, overextending too much to put out damage. And it was just one of those things that, he needs to work on that. And if you're going to have that issue with a high mobility character like Moira, that's something that you got to nip in the butt real quick. And again, against a Hunters team that's now joined Rare Company, Washington, Vancouver, and Boston is one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, that's kind of a good time to have that kind of glaring problem pop its head out.
Yeah, I agree. So we already talked about the Shanghai Spark match that set us off on the 10th. And so, and which is perfect because I wanted to get into the next Spitfire match against the Charge. The Charge, this was a statement match for the Charge. This is a Spitfire team that has won it all, that has been playing okay, but the Charge have been really playing well. I should say it's been a statement weekend. You beat NYXL, you beat the Spitfire. Two teams that have historically been at the top of the league, since it began. Hiley was putting out lots of DPS, which I do like to see. But all of a sudden, you've got Wrecking Ball, and J-Mac just looks out of sorts. So you had him on a shield tank against the Hunters, and he didn't really get any practice against other teams, against a dive comp, or even a double shield. And now all of a sudden, he's on this Wrecking Ball, and he's on a Wrecking Ball against a Sombra and against no shield. So he's getting picked left and right. He died first 6 or 7 times in these team fights, and I just stopped counting because it was just so many where he's getting hacked, he can't roll out, he's dead immediately. So you offer no value to the rest of your team. You are no longer tanking damage. You are no longer knocking the team around to move them around, and the other team's in a dive anyway. So I don't really see the value in knocking around a Winston when Winston wants to be knocked around. He wants to jump around. He wants you to follow him. That's his whole shtick. So he wants to be able to dive in like that. He's not getting picks on healers like Balls can do so well. So I think JMac, and I don't know if that was a coaching decision, probably a coaching decision, but the Spitfire really stuck with that ball until later in the match when they finally switched him to Orisa, and by that point it was too late. He already looked confused. The Sombra for the charge had just taken over, and he couldn't do anything.
Right. And for me, that's where I take it was more this the statement game for the Charge was the first game against the NYXL because that's primarily still the same team. This London Spitfire team is a completely new roster. So any previous success they had, including their championship, is associated with now the Seoul Dynasty, really, because that's where the majority of that roster went.
It's fair.
So for me, this was a statement game for the Spitfire. You come in, you had a weak opponent your first day back after, again, about a month. You go in, you play very well, have a couple things to kind of tweak on over the next couple hours going into this match. And rather than tweak those things, you just make complete comp changes. Like you said, with JMac on the wrecking ball. And it's like, why would you? It's again, like we've spoken about, especially heavily last week with so many different ups and downs for these teams. Why would you break up synergy? Why would you break up rhythm? It'd be like if you asked Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan if they were out there and they hit 12 of 12 from the field. And then you said, okay, we need you to pass the ball. And, oh, don't take it from the field. We need you to start shooting threes. I mean, he might have the jump shot rhythm there, but now you're asking him to shoot further back. And you're also asking him to break up that rhythm of the shooting by passing the ball more. You don't ask somebody to do that. You let them build up a rhythm, get used to the things that they need to, and then you let the hero pool dictate their fate the next week because then you could practice for that. This looked like it was just kind of thrown together last minute by the coaching staff, and it didn't work. And it just gave Charge another match to be able to perfect what they've already perfected and look dominant doing it. And now they've got additional momentum off of that win to roll into next week.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad you said rhythm because I did put that exact word in my note. JMac could not find any rhythm with any tanks that he was playing on or with his compadres there against him. Now, they both switched off of dive on Junkertown, and the Charge just did it better. I mean, Krong was the best tank on the field for either team. He just played well no matter what he was playing, especially on the Sigma late. It just didn't matter. So now I want to skip over the match that I know you want to talk about, and I want you to tell me about the Toronto and the Shock.
That match was interesting for me, because, and we had kind of talked about it last week with Surefour. He gets pulled in and out so much that the chemistry of the team gets altered.
Yeah, they won the
not just
map he was on.
Right, and it's not just match to match that chemistry breaks up. It's map to map, and it baffles me. You have success against a team that they've started to now play different competition, so they're not playing repeat opponents, and they've kind of got this new lineup set, and they're starting to show a whole new look and a whole new energy, and they're playing so much better. And you had a composition and players that not only could match that, could play better than that. And because you had a pre-existing game plan you were so dedicated to, you pulled your guy back out who wasn't even supposed to be on that map. So it makes me wonder what's going on with the Defiant coaching staff, because they have easily one of the, if you look at them on paper, it's kind of like Dallas Fuel now. They're starting to play the way they should.
Yes.
Toronto has just as much talent, but they take one step forward and then they take two steps back. They start to lean forward and then they just fall off the cliff. That's what it's like match to match watching the Defiant. And if you're going to try and do that against the San Francisco Shock, you're going to lose, because the Shock, they're not going to let you, you have that one map, you did great. Oh, you changed it up, well, we're going to make you pay for it. We're going to put our foot on the throttle, and then we're just going to run right through and cap all 3 points. And good luck trying to even get one off of us the next time around, because you don't have Surefour.
And they're so easily a rolling team. When the shot get going, it's really hard to stop them, and they don't seem to really even be missing the pieces that they've lost because they weren't really playing anyway. I did want to say, as one bright spot though, that I did think that Logic's on McCree was really nullifying what Rascal was trying to do on Echo. He did play well, he did his role well, and he was really nullifying Echo. The rest of the team just wasn't really picking up around him. So I did shout out to Logix for really having a day on that one.
Yeah, he did handle his role very well. He did his job.
All right, skipping over once again the last match that I want to talk about. I want to briefly talk about Florida Vancouver. This is a match that we both assumed would be 3-0, especially after the first showing against the Justice. Obviously, the the Mayhem are a better team than the Justice, and it's the same team going against this Vancouver team. So, not really a whole lot to say other than keep your chin up, Vancouver. Really run behind your tanks that seem to be playing okay, but there just isn't much for you guys. Now, Yaki played lights out. It's a 12-map win streak for Florida, so I know they're feeling really good about that. Yaki played a couple, made a couple plays, and then decided to tactical crouch on the whole squad, which was great. I mean, I'm not normally for that, but I thought the one where he basically got a team kill was incredibly warranted.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of.
Which you would.
It would have been warranted had it been against any other team. Yaki, you're basically playing against platinum level players right now. There's no reason for that.
No, see, what's funny to me is you finally saw that play when you had missed it. I texted you, I'm like, dude, did you see this?
Yeah,
and you went,
I missed it.
I'm a little busy. And I'm like, well, you missed it. And those are the moments that I've talked about. Just kind of quick side note. Those are the moments that I talk about. That's when the tactical crouch. That's when it's warranted. When you pull off something like that.
Yeah, you get a team kill, you can tactical crouch.
But if you just kill one guy and you're like, teabag, no, just stop that. But the only thing that I would say about this match is Florida do look good, and they've had flashes of greatness or flashes of good play, either way you want to look at it, against the better teams. But this streak they're riding is against Uprising, Justice, Titans, and they're getting the Justice again. Teams. So not good teams. They need to rein it in, not get too ahead of themselves, and just sure up a few things here and there, because there were some sloppy moments that the Titans almost jumped on, especially on Junkertown.
Yep.
And they were fortunate to not let it go off the rails.
But at least they are doing what they should be against these
against teams. The teams they should.
Yeah, they should be 3-0ing these teams, and maybe they could be a more flawless 3-0. I think it's very easy to get lackadaisical when you're playing against teams like this, and you're already up 2-0, or you're already up 1-0. I mean, they're just basically speed running the Overwatch League right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this was my personal match of the week, was Dallas and Philly. It's the last match that we are going to talk about. Give me your thoughts.
My biggest thoughts were, and let me start with complimenting the Fusion on one thing before I knock them on another. It was, well, only because it was great to see. Last week they had Carpe on the bench, and they had moments where they looked very, very vulnerable and basically showed no depth to their team. That they're starting six. This week they don't have Poco, but they have Carpe. And we saw for the first time this season, Philadelphia not have to win a fight by picking somebody early. They didn't have to be on the defense on a payload or capture point, waiting for a team to come out spawn and just picking off the straggler. We finally saw them go, we're going to engage 6v6. We're going to do what we can positionally to win this fight. And if we can't, we'll use what ults we need, what abilities we need to prolong the fight to get our other teammates back in here so we can try and go 6v6. So showing that they can finally do that is huge for them going forward. My only issue is you cannot be that dependent on one ultimate for that long. The way they had to guard their sound barrier for pretty much every engagement once they switched to the Lucio, you had to be that dependent. That's frightening. Regardless of whether or not you got Carpe, regardless of who's in your off-tank role, whether it's Poco or somebody else, you have to be able to say, okay, we got hacked here. What do we have available that we can use? Let's utilize it to the best of our ability. And then once everybody's back online, pop that sucker. Let's win this fight, even if we're down 1 or 2. There's just some, it's nothing with mechanics and it's nothing with hero choices because they've got that on lock.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the execution of the X's and O's. And if they can just start doing, we saw them in the first season, they didn't care who they were playing against or how many people they had. We saw them winning fights down 2 guys and no alts. We'd see them win 4-6 just by somebody, whether it was
clutching up.
EQO or even Neptuno sometimes would come in with his Battle Mercy. He was the one that made it infamous. He'd come in with Battle Mercy and pick off a scraggler DPS who overextended and didn't heal. And just, we saw this kind of stuff happen. And now we see them playing so, for lack of a better word, hesitantly. And you can't do that if you're trying to vie for a championship. You've got to be, you have to be a little more assertive regardless of what you might lose.
Yeah, and I think that it was a good point that you talked about the 6v6 team fights because they did. And with this dive comp, they're messy fights, like we said before. They're messy fights where you're losing people first. Sometimes you're losing 2 people, but you can still win this fight because the shields are down, and now it's just skill on skill. And Philly was winning those fights. We've seen Dallas generally win those mirror comps. That seems to be their strong point. They can say, I can play this hero better than you can. And they win those one-on-one fights. They just weren't doing it. They were losing fights, and this is another one. It was 3-1, but this very easily could have been 3-1 Dallas. Very easily. There were just a couple key fights that Philly won. And it's because they were winning these one-on-one battles. And I think the biggest one-on-one battle that was being played out is between the Sombras. Hisu won the Sombra battle. He was charging his ult much faster. He was hitting more people. I think at one point Uber had said that Hisu was hitting 3.2 people per EMP.
3.2, it was almost 3.3.
Like that. So
almost
it was at least half the squad getting hit by this EMP, and that is huge, especially when you're playing in these messy team fights when those ults and the ability usage is so important. And I really think that Hisu, I don't want to say he won them the match, but him winning his one-on-one battle with the other Sombra, I think really allowed them to win those key team fights, to take points. And the match didn't disappoint. I personally was rooting for Dallas because I like to see the underdog, but I think that Philly really improved, and they beat an improving and pretty solid Dallas team. So hats off to Philly on that one.
And my one thing that I do want to say now that you brought it up, it was, for me, Funny Astro was who won them the match, not Hisu, simply because Hisu would be doing his job. Again, he had that 3.3 average. But if you look at the stat of how many eliminations they got off of his EMPs, if he got 3 or more, it was pretty low, at least until they got to Anubis. And then finally they're like, oh, hey, he just got 4 guys. Maybe we should kill somebody. There were so many where they would give a fight away, not only because Dallas was playing better than them in those fights, but because Hisu would do his job, and then it was like he was standing there with his arms up like, guys, all right, no?
But it
all right, I'll be right back. I'll build it up again.
Force the team to back off, though, when you hit him with that EMP. I do think that Funny Astro played his ass off, and I did look up his stats as well. He has played so well all year. He's in, I believe that in the top 10 for most of that, but his elimination stats are very high for healing. I mean, he's on a list of almost all DPS.
He's like, up there.
Yeah. So I don't think that his play was the reason they won, but I obviously very instrumental to them winning. Funny Astro's positioning as well has always been fantastic, but I think them winning the Sombra battle and them winning those very messy team fights where they're, each team it's down to 3v3, who's going to win it. And Philly just won more of those matches.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I did want to talk about our little competition that we have. So If you missed last week, the competition is we are doing predictions for the week upcoming, and we'll do those again for week 15 at the end of this podcast. And if you get the map count right, you get a bonus point. So if I say, like if I had called Philly 3-1, which I believe I did, but if I called Philly 3-1 or whatever, no, 3-0. Okay. So say I had said Philly 3-1, I would get a point for Philly winning, and then I would also get a point for getting the exact map count. It doesn't work the other way, as Nick tried to sneakily say, well, I got the map.
No, I did not. I did not.
So
I did not.
Even though the team that I picked to win lost, it's fine.
Hold on.
No, it's fine.
No. I asked because I've had that played against me in the past, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make sure Austin doesn't try to do this nonsense. So I'm gonna ask him and make sure he wasn't like, well, I got the map count right, because I've heard it so many times in the past. So
no, map count only counts if you also picked the winner, because you're saying Philly is gonna win 3 and Dallas is gonna win 1. So that's how we did this.
I said 3.
And
anyway.
as of right now, Nick is ahead by 1 point. So 1 point. So Nick had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points, and I had 9 points. It was a crazy weekend. We definitely did not nail most of these, but we did get a couple map counts
fair
right to bolster our scores a little bit there. So we brought up the Justice. So this was Stratus's last match, which unfortunately was against Vancouver. Didn't really require him to do a whole lot, but it was against Vancouver. Now this Stratus is now moving on. Now he's staying with the team as a content creator, and I'm not sure entirely what he's going to be doing. I would assume it'd have to do something with the hype videos and things like that, and player videos and montages, because he does so many of those for himself, and over the summer break was doing a lot of those for the team as well. How big of an impact is this going to have with him and now Corey also leaving for Valorant?
I think it's going to be a massive hit, because we saw, and we have seen, they were their highlights. Like, they were what were driving them, especially like the match that still sticks out in my mind every time I think about the Washington Justice, and specifically when I think about Corey as a player, is that match against Vancouver last year. We had just come out of the GOATS meta, and even out of that meta, the Titans still looked just absolutely dominant, and we're just still running through people. We see the Justice come out. We see the Justice come out and just slap them all over the place. And primarily it was Corey's Hanzo that led the way. And it showed that, hey, this Washington team is actually really good. They don't do GOATs well. Mm-hmm. But then we see now this is the standard going forward, and they're struggling. And Corey, yes, he's leading in his statistical categories, but the team can't decide on if it's going to be Tuba, if it's going to be Stratus, and it throws off the rhythm for both of those players. You bring in Aim God, and he and Arc maybe don't have the same mentality, whereas Arc's more defensive. That's why Arc complemented Jonak so well in New York, was Arc was much more defensive. He would sit back and do the healing, which opened up Jonak to be able to do, what we see him do all the time.
Yeah.
And now he got a better compliment, and Anamo to be able to do those things. Aim God's never quite been like that. He's never quite been the balance of damage and healing. He's been primarily more healing. And so because of that, we saw a lot more burden on Corey, Stratus, and even Tuba, and they just can't handle it. And I think going forward, the Washington Justice will be they'll be the new Boston Uprising, the new, as they were, Florida Mayhem before. They're going to be one of those teams. If they don't start shoring things up, we could possibly see somebody finally match Shanghai's abysmal record and status season. From the opening season. Yeah. And that would be just be disappointing.
That's for damn sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this does unfortunately put Tuba as the only DPS player currently on their roster. So Corey leaving for Valorant, and he had said that he always wanted to be actually a CSGO pro. So this makes perfect sense for him. It's like this game was made for him. It's an Overwatch and a CSGO kind of had a baby. It's mostly CS:GO, 80-20, but so I think his skills will translate a little bit over to that. Obviously, with the reaction time being the quickest and easiest way to be good at the game, like CS:GO and Valorant. So I understand why he's doing it, and I think we're gonna see a couple other people follow eventually, especially after the end of the season and once Valorant fully is released. Because right now it's still in beta, and I can't believe that we have people leaving to go pro in a league that doesn't exist yet. But that's what they want to do, and that's fine. So they are now under the limit of 8 and only having 2. So I actually did have a fan question, and I had 3 fan questions that I wanted to get to. So thank you for your fan questions. I had 2 from Twitter, and I had 1 emailed to me. So the first fan question was, do you think that any former Titans players are going to be picked up by the Justice?
Do I think they will? No. Would I like them to be? Absolutely. First one off my mind is Stitch. I think Stitch would be very, very good with the Washington Justice because their primary comp that they seem to want to run is dive. And we've seen Stitch be a very solid tracer. And if you're losing Corey and Stratus both, who can either one play that role, then absolutely you want to bring a guy like that in and let him take over that entire operation. But outside of that, I really don't know who else they could pick up because, I mean, there's still, it's not finalized, but Janu seems to still be going to Dallas.
Yep.
We don't know. Ryu Jahong said he's taking a break for a while to kind of reevaluate things.
Which is so unfortunate, man.
It is unfortunate, and it's mostly unfortunate just because he's been streaming a lot of Valorant, and I don't want to lose that to the Valorant League. I think that would be huge if he goes. Then we might start to see a bigger exodus because he's made his living on Overwatch, and that's the game that he's primarily played on stage and on stream. If he starts to switch, we'll see a shift because they'll lose one of their, ambassadors. Yeah. But I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't really see them picking up any of the Titans players either. I think the one player that they would go for would be Stitch or Haxel. Obviously, Haxel is the best DPS player that's not currently on a roster. I don't know if he is wanting to go somewhere. Did he get picked up already?
No, he did not.
Oh, okay, you were smiling, and I was like, did he get picked up already? Like,
I had a different thought. No, I had a different thought.
No, say it.
Is he really the best DPS that's available right now?
Who's better?
You know who I'm gonna say. Granted, he still has NYXL affiliation, so he can't go anywhere. So, Pine, hands down.
No, he's not available. And
I know, but
I say available. I think Haxel's better.
Oh, okay. But I say available in not currently playing actively in the league.
Sure, but
technically he's not available because he's still under the rights, right? But you get what I'm getting at.
I get what you're saying. So thank you for that question, but no, I don't think that anyone's going to get picked up. I don't think they're going to want to play for Washington. They make enough money from streaming and endorsements and other things like that I don't think that it's imperative that they jump on a team unless they think that team is going to end up somewhere near the championship, and obviously the Justice are not going to do that. So I had another question. That first one was from a email. The next 2 were Twitter DMs that were sent to me. Who do you think wins the whole thing? I think that's a pretty broad question that gets asked a lot. This is a tough one because the games have been so crazy and they've been so close. Mm-hmm. And right now, I think the Charge are the best looking team. I could see them very well. They rotate very well. They mesh with any composition. The only thing that is going to lack for them is that I don't think they necessarily do any one comp better than another team. They just tend to switch around a lot better than these other teams can. So as soon as this roll lock is over, we'll see how they perform. But I could very easily see them winning the whole thing with how they've been playing.
For me, it's whoever comes out of the Atlantic Division. And that's going to come down to me, the 3 teams out of Atlantic. It's going to come down to Shanghai, NYXL, Philadelphia. It's going to be one of those 3 coming out of the Atlantic.
Yep.
As much as I think you've got a team in Dallas, who I think is unappreciated, could make a run and be one of those dangerous teams in the end. You've got the Gladiators, who are also one of those. Paris could mix things up in the Atlantic Division, but for me, those are the teams. And out of the Pacific Division for the Gladiators, I believe the Fuel are in the newly reformed Pacific. I just don't think those kind of teams can match up to San Fran at this point, because San Fran also, let's not forget, they just won this weekend against a good Defiant team.
Yeah.
Without Stryker, who's hands down their best player right now.
Agreed.
And so it's just going to be one of those three teams versus San Fran in the final, I think. And who knows what's going to happen between now and then.
Yeah, and I think you could throw the Reign in with the Dallas group, a team that I think is less flashy than some of these other teams. They're not going to be as swarming as Shanghai can get. They don't put maybe not quite as much damage like NYXL can, but I think they can upset some teams, and we've seen them do that. I mean, when they beat NYXL last year, so we can definitely see them beat some better. Voice is breaking. Some better teams, but
real quick, while you're drinking that,
puberty.
Maybe. Well, I was gonna say, while you were drinking that water, I do need to correct myself, because I went and looked up the new, because we had all that movement with the divisions with the online play. So right now, here's what we have conference-wise. Okay. We have Philly, New York, Florida, London, Atlanta, Paris, Toronto, Houston, Washington, Boston. That leaves in the Pacific Division Shanghai, San Fran, Seoul, Charge, Gladiators, Spark, Fuel, Valiant, Titans, Hunters.
That's insane.
So that changes my answer, because I'm sitting here going, okay, I think the Dragons are better than the Shock. I think the Dynasty, if they ride off this momentum from the weekend, they'll be better than the Shock, and right there with the Dragons. And then you're throwing in the Mayhem and the Spitfire as they stand right now against
the Dynasty are better
Philadelphia
than the
and New York. I've said if they continue off of this weekend, they will be.
Sure.
If they keep the ship rolling this way, oh my gosh, they absolutely can be, especially considering one of Jester's a pretty good Winston. He gets a lot of credit for his Winston. In fact, they've got a skin because of their Winston play from the finals. But his Reinhardt is nothing to sneeze at. And with Reinhardt hopefully going to be in the meta for a few weeks, I swear to goodness, if we get 1 week of Reinhardt and then he's banned again, I might have to stop watching matches, because this is getting irritating that he's out 1 week. We finally get him back and then he's out again. Yeah, I think he's been banned more than any hero.
Yeah.
Anyway, my rant's over. So I think because of that as well, it's going to benefit the Dynasty a little bit more. And that could propel them to be up there with those top teams.
Yeah, I don't agree that Seoul is going to be better than the Shock, even if they carry on. Their win against Shanghai is a staple win, and I think it's absolutely good for them. I don't want to call it a fluke, but I don't think that they're going to beat the better teams like the Shock. I don't think that they're going to beat those teams, especially in a non-regular season mode. The last Twitter question that I got is actually not about the league. It's about us.
I had a feeling that there was going to be one of those when you said, I got questions. I'm like, one of these is going to be non-league related. Go watch.
Yeah. It was, hey, what's Nick's number? No, I'm just kidding. It was, he's single, ladies. It was, and men, it was, who's a better Overwatch player between us? And I want to break this down into the three compartments.
Let's let the objective one over here answer.
That's me.
You are the better tank player.
Yes.
We're equal on DPS. I am the better healer.
I think that my healing...
No, don't even.
I think that my healing number is higher than yours.
No, don't even. No.
I'll tell you what I place.
It depends on what you're looking for. If you want a tank and DPS, he's your guy. If you want DPS and support, a true flex, here.
Well, and we play different DPS as well. I generally do flankers, and you generally do mid-range. So I don't know if one of us is better. I will say that I have hit platinum. For those of you that haven't reached that level yet, that stands for platinum. I have hit platinum on tank, and Nick, have you hit platinum on any of yours?
How often do I play comp? Almost never. So, but when I do, I place high gold, almost plat. So,
Well, I placed that on my
listen,
support, so I'm just
for me, I don't place as much stock in ranking as other people.
that's what I would say
When
if
I know,
mine was lower too.
listen, I know the system's broken because when you get placed and then you lose, but you're meddling in everything that you should be meddling in,
Yeah.
and you're not dying that often, like you're getting what you should. You're playing flawless, but your team is losing. You get punished for it, which means that your rating is going to go down.
Yeah.
So for me, the system's broken because it's like, oh, I can go in and do what I'm supposed to, but because I got, a guy who doesn't even know how to left click over here on DPS, okay, all right, that's fine. I'll take that L and another 10. Sure. It's just dumb. So don't place all your eggs on that rating basket, because we've also seen plat players who don't know what they're talking about when it comes to the match.
Oh yeah, we definitely know a couple players that place high and don't actually know what they're talking about. But so
don't
so
know.
To answer your question,
we've come across ones.
Yeah,
to
no,
answer the question.
I meant we all know, like all as in, like just people in general. Everybody knows someone that places high that either shouldn't be there, or
sometimes that wording you got to watch it.
Yeah. Oh well.
But so to answer the question, we're about equal
at different things. I think I'm a better tank than you are support. But moving on.
Oh.
So
I thought you never mind. I thought you were gonna say better tank than me. I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
No.
Whatever.
So let's give our predictions for the next week, and I'll actually have you take a note of these as we go down, if you don't mind. If there's an easy way for you to do that, or you can go back and watch.
I'll probably go back and watch unless you want to forward me yours, because I have mine all typed up. So I could just paste yours right next to mine if you wanted to send it to me.
Oh no, I didn't write them down. You wrote yours down?
Yeah.
No, I just they're already here.
I write everything down, man.
Okay, first match will kick us off at 4 a.m. on May 16th. Soul Hunters. What are you thinking?
I've got the Soul 3-0.
Yeah, I have the Soul 3-0 as well. The Hunters are not going to pick up a match against Seoul, especially since they just came off of beating Shanghai. I think they put a couple things together. Not going to happen. And then Shanghai, speaking of which, starts at 6 a.m. on May 16th. They're going against the Spitfire. I think Shanghai is going to win this 3-1.
I said Shanghai 3-1 as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were 3-2. But I'm going with 3-1.
Yeah, I just don't think that in these trade-off fights that the Spitfire are going to win those. This is an interesting one because they're both coming off of losses to good teams. So you have NYXL and Spark at 8 a.m., which sucks for NYXL constantly playing early in the morning. I think that's very detrimental. But so who do you have?
I've got NYXL. I want to say 3-0, but I only give 3-0s to teams that I don't think could beat anybody. Usually, I think it's going to be 3-1 NYXL. That's why I gave the Hunters 0. I mean, the Hunters look bad.
Yeah, I think they look.
They can't even decide on a comp.
I think that this is a very easily winnable match by the Excelsior, and I hope that it's 3-1. That's my guess, is that it's 3-1, but I hope it's 3-1 because they experimented later in the match when it was already 2-0, and then they lose and drop a map, and that's fine with me. So I'm going to say 3-1. Vancouver, Houston. I don't know. I really don't, because obviously Houston is not very good. They're not playing well. I think they played okay against Reign, still not able to get it done. But Vancouver is right now not even, they're professional level players, and it's nothing against them. They were just thrown into a really tough situation with an already losing record. So I'm gonna tentatively say that Houston wins this one 3-2. to 1.
See, I actually have it 3-2, and just to kind of emphasize that whole I write everything down, I actually wrote in parentheses, what the F even is this match?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we've got to give the Titans some credit with their roster. They've got
Sure.
their pro players. They've played at some
No, they
professional
played
level.
contenders.
They play contenders, and we
Yeah.
even have some guys who like went and made an impact in the World Cup this past year.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah, but
just
so
not
did
good,
Ruckus.
right?
Ruckus made an
I'm sorry.
impact in
I'm
the
sorry
World
for the
Cup. And
backs of the other 5 American players that he was with. But thank you
actually,
for bringing home the gold.
Ruckus played lights out during that match. He played
He played all right.
as well as he
played all
could
right.
have. So okay, that one's gonna be.
I
interesting.
said Outlaws 3-2.
Okay. I'm gonna guess 3-1. I hope Outlaws.
I'd love to
lose
see it be
this
3-0
one.
Outlaws. I'd love for it to be 3-0 Outlaws.
Don't lose this one.
But
This
I
is your
just
chance.
don't lose it.
This
Just
is your
don't.
chance. Don't mess it up. Dante, player of the match. Florida, Washington. Again, they're playing, a lesser team. I think especially now, I think it's going to be 3-0. I think
I
Florida
said
3-0.
3-0. I said 3-0 as well, Florida.
3-0 for the next one too. I think we're going to have a lot of really lopsided matches.
It's going to be bad.
Gladiators, Boston. Gladiators have been, I didn't think they played super well over this past weekend, but they played better than Boston. And they played 3-0 better than Boston.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And I agree, 3-0
Yeah.
Gladiators.
All right, now this is one of my matches of the weekend in the Shock versus the Reign. I think this is going to be a very close one, but I think the Shock bring it out 3-2.
I said the Shock 3-2 as well, because I think the same.
I need you to say something else. It's not a competition if we agree with each other.
I mean, we're making our predictions. I'm not going to, hey, listen, I'm not going to be the Skip Bayless of Overwatch and go say something asinine, okay? Not going to do it.
Well,
just
you
for the
already
sake of
said
having
the
our
Dynasty was better than the Shock, so you're already.
I said it. No,
already
I did not.
halfway
I said if they rode the momentum off this weekend, they can potentially. Stop putting words in my mouth.
Well, I already did. It's replaced your name.
Take the quotes off there, man.
Fine.
You see the crap I have to deal with here? Thank you.
Better here. Let me rename myself also right at the end.
Right. Well, we've still got
Oh,
5
I
more
forgot to
predictions
add
to
your-
go. Oh, I don't need the 121.
Nope, too late.
Okay, that's fine.
So yeah, I think that one's gonna be a fun match. I think that one has the potential to be a classic.
Agreed.
Charge Hunters. I think it's another 3-0. I just don't think there's any way the Hunters take a map.
No, and not just 3-0 because it's the Hunters. It's 3-0 because it's the Charge, and they're going to be only missing, I think, 1 hero out of their pool for next week, and it's not even one of their high priority heroes.
And they move around players and heroes so well anyway, as we've talked. It's like a well-oiled machine, so I don't think it matters. Take out half of the roster of heroes available, and the Charge are still going to figure out some way to get it done on duct tape and band-aids.
Most likely, yeah.
So I think this one could be close as well. So we have the Spark versus London. I actually have the Spark winning this one 3-2.
I've actually got the Spitfire 3-1.
Okay. I think that the smart money is on London. I think they're the better team, but I think one of these matches where it seems like it's going to be an easy victory for the other team, one of those is going to go wrong, and I think that it could very easily go wrong for the Spitfire because we have seen them crumble against teams they shouldn't. So I think that that's what's going to happen. Dallas, Paris.
Okay, I didn't have this one written down because, oh my gosh, I don't know.
I think this is another close one.
Because this is going to be, it's 3-2 either way for me.
Okay. Well, that's against the rules.
I know, but it's what it comes down to for me is, do I trust Paris's support more, or do I trust the Fuel's DPS more?
Yeah.
And because for Soon and Nico, they're good, but I mean, we're talking about shoot, man. I just don't know. I don't know. I'm probably gonna go Fuel 3-2.
Fuel 3-2.
So, but
I
yeah, I'm
think
torn.
this will be my bold prediction of I think that the Fuel are going to take it 3-1. I think that they
Okay.
are going to play exceptionally well, and I could very easily see this being a Dallas 3-0 against the Eternals. Not because Paris is bad, but I think that the way that Dallas just played, if they play that well against Paris, Paris really might not win a map. They really might not. I'm going to give them one because Dallas is not infallible. So I'm going to give them one. I think Dallas wins 3-1.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So I want to play a little sound clip before I announce the next one.
Oh no.
Is this easy
And I can't hear
mode?
this.
I know.
Is this easy
It's
mode?
dumb.
Sorry. And I use that because it's Philly going against Vancouver. I think Philly could put in their backup roster and still win this 3-0.
I was actually gonna say 3-0, obviously Fusion. I was going to say this is my bold prediction because we saw how bad it was. I could see the Fusion topping the Mayhem record of fastest match.
Okay. A fastest.
I
Like the whole match, not map
like
time. The whole match.
match. And if they
Okay.
set a couple map records along the way, I could see that too.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm gonna need you
just
to write that down.
I have it typed out.
Okay. Map
It's
record.
saved in everything.
Match record. I would hate to see that happen to such a budding team, but I it's possible. I mean, the Fusion right now are topping our charts on the wins and losses and map differential. They're the best team in the league. So against obviously the worst. Obviously the worst team. So I agree. And then for the last one is another match that I think could have the potential to be a very good one is the Defiant versus the Valiant. I had a hard time with this one. I think even more so than some of the other ones. I'm gonna say with the heroes that are gone, I'm gonna say Valiant 3-1. And you picked Toronto.
No, I
Hold
didn't
on.
pick this one yet.
What did you have? Oh, I was gonna say, what did you have written down? Whatever
No,
you
I
had
didn't have
written
this
down, you
one.
have to stick with.
I didn't have this one picked.
I
And
think
it's still
KSP
hard to
and
pick.
Shax are too much.
Here's what my issue is. We know that they're going to play. Who is Toronto going to play? If they play Sure 4 and Agilities, I'm taking Toronto. They play Logics and Sure 4. It's a true toss-up. You play Logics and Agilities, the Valiant are going to win 3-1. Like, I want to say 3-2 Defiant, but it's so dependent on who the Toronto Defiant start at DPS.
Yeah.
But because I feel like they are going to make the mistake they're going to make, I'm going to say 3-1 Valiant.
Okay. Well, that is all there. So let's finish and round out the episode by giving our top 5. I think that they have changed now. I definitely know that mine have because of the wins and losses that happened over this crazy weekend. So from 5 to 1, who's your top 5 right now?
And I told you before we started, I have no confidence in this whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because I've got multiple teams in here at 5.
Well, that's against the rules. The rules that I made up.
Okay, the rules you made up for 1 and 2. I have always been a proponent of. I believe power rankings are a load of crap.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
especially reinforces. They're just so bad.
Called
terrible.
out.
They're terrible. I love reinforce, but not his power rankings. They're terrible.
Well,
also his love of May. Can we just get that out of the way? Stop defending May. Let Custa abuse May.
I
all
love
he
May.
needs to. Let's see. If I have to pick one at 5, I'm gonna go with the Fusion. I think that since we saw them shore up that issue that I had
You're putting the Fusion at 5.
at 5,
Okay.
yes. And you're not gonna like my 3, and it's actually a tie because I can't pick. So it's 1, 2, 2 at 3, and then a 5. So there's no 4. There's still top 5.
No,
but,
that's fine. Yeah. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. But I think Philly, they shored up my question mark. They have a new question mark, but it's easy to fix. So I do believe they're top 5, but I want to see them play more better competition because they still have played two. Like this was their first match that wasn't a repeat all season,
Sure.
aside from the NYXL match. So I tied at 3. I have the Charge and the Dynasty. I think the Charge's win propels them up into that conversation of top 5 because they beat who I think is the second best team in the league in NYXL. And they beat them doing what they do best, their comp, their style. They didn't make any adjustments or any compromises. They said, this is how we're going to play and we're going to do it and we're going to win. And they did. While NYXL was still like, let's tinker and see what we can shore up and what we can get away with and just try to get better as the season goes on and we get more availability. Mm-hmm. And I really put a lot of stock in the Dynasty beating the Dragons. And they just looked so good doing it. And now the Dragons are still the number 1 team for me because it was a quality loss against a quality opponent that's finally been like, you know what, let's stop overthinking this and go back to what works best. But for the Dynasty, it was one of those wins where they just looked, even though it was a 5-map win, and the Dragons have every reason to walk out of that loss with their head held high, and they went out and they took care of business against the Spark. The Dynasty just looked so good, and they didn't let the times that the Dragons stepped up and put them back down. Like, hey, we're the best team. Stay down there. You know, don't try and challenge us. The Dynasty still got back up and we're like, oh, we're going to take you all the distance. So let's get into it. So that was my top 5.
Okay. And I think that's fine. I don't have any issue with you putting the Dynasty in the top 5. I don't think that they are, but I can easily see how you could put them in the top 5. So they're not in mine. So if I was going to say, I'm actually going to go opposite. I'm going to start at the top because I think that's easier for my brain to handle. I'm going to put Philly at 1.
Okay.
And it's because they won their losable match. Shanghai did not. Shanghai played the Dynasty, which was a losable match, obviously. And they lost it. So I still think that Philly, if they played head-to-head, would lose to Shanghai. But I think how they're playing right now, I just don't think that there's anyone that's better right now. I think that Shanghai has to move down to number 2. I do have the Shock at number 3. I don't have a tie there. I actually have the Charge at number 4. And then to round out the bottom, I have NYXL at number 5. I think them losing how they did this weekend really knocked them down. And I know that their record is still good and that the Charge have more losses. But just talking about this week, you know, from how they played this week and last week, I think the Charge are really, really looking good, and I'm very excited to see how they do in the tournament and see how they're coming along. I think that they're definitely my team to watch right now, and I believe that they have knocked the Reign down. I think they played better than the Reign did this weekend. So that was my top 5.
Okay.
Anything else to add before we close it out?
That's it for me. I got nothing.
Well, this was fun. This was week 14. Getting ahead of myself. We just talked about week 15. Week 14 in the Overwatch League recapped. Tac Visor podcast. You can see our socials below and the social over there. You can follow us on Twitch, Twitter. We both stream on Twitch, so you can count us out when we go live. Like, follow, subscribe, share it to your friends. Email us at tacvisorpod@gmail.com with your questions, or send either one of us a DM with your questions and we will air them on here. and go about them. I'll probably pick 3 or 4 depending on the length that I think that the answers are going to be and how good I think the questions are. I will call you out if you send me something stupid, but at least you'll get to be on the air. So thanks for hanging out, and as always, that's enough of that.
Mm-hmm.